David Cameron has been fighting for a new deal for Britain in Europe. I'm joined here in London by Janan Ganesh, the chief political commentator of the Financial Times, and in Brussels by Peter Spiegel, our chief European correspondent, on the front line. Peter, what's happening in Brussels?
Well, it's been much tougher for Cameron than we expected. He's been fighting, frankly, on almost every single front. We knew there would be a big debate about this benefits issue, particularly this emergency brake that allows him to sort of restrict work benefits for EU citizens living in Britain.
Mainly for Central and Eastern European workers, right?
Yeah, and particularly the Poles, who are very concerned about this. The Poles have now been briefing us that they have 100,000 children who get benefits from workers outside of Poland. They are fighting to preserve those benefits, where Cameron really wants to be able to curtail that. And they're very worried that other European countries will get ideas, that they're going to want to start banning and restricting benefits to the children and to other workers in their countries as well. So that's been very tough for him. But we also have Francois Hollande, who's been fighting with him as well on this issue of special treatment, special protections for non-Euro countries. So he's been really fighting on multiple fronts, and that's why it's gone much later than we anticipated.
Janan, is this going to present real problems for Mr. Cameron when he comes home, trying to sell the deal to his own Tory party?
Huge problems. It's been 3 years since the Bloomberg speech, when David Cameron began this whole process of renegotiation and referendum. Back then, he promised a fundamental reform of Britain's terms of membership.
Overpromised.
He certainly did overpromise, because nothing in the discussions of the past 2 days, or in the preliminary deal a couple of weeks ago with Donald Tusk, the council president, amount to a fundamental reform, whether of migration or even the relationship between in and out countries in the Eurozone. On both those areas, he's getting things that are less than fundamental, in some cases completely sketchy, and it does create a problem when it comes to binding his own party in favour of staying in the EU in a referendum that might only be 4 months away.
Peter, why haven't other European countries given Mr. Cameron a break? I know Enda Kenny, the Prime Minister of Ireland, talked about the Battle of Britain and called for sympathy, but Mr. Cameron doesn't seem to have had many friends.
I mean, the problem is you have to realize what came before this, right? I mean, he spent 5-6 years coming to Brussels every summit, beating up on the Europeans. Every summit, there seemed to be some issue where something horrible was happening in Brussels, and he would fight to make sure those darn Europeans don't ruin things for Britain. Then suddenly he shows up and says, guys, got to do me a favor here, do me a proper. You just can't do that in a European context. If you want to win favors, you have to play by the game over the course of years, if not multiple governments. So the problem was he did not do the hard work beforehand, that when he really push came to shove, he really needed the deal. He didn't have the allies around the table that he needed.
And it's not been helped by the fact that Mr. Cameron, it was his decision, took the Conservative Party out of the principal centre-right grouping, the European People's Party, in the European Parliament, which will have a say over this deal.
I mean, absolutely, and who's basically the major person in that center-right party? Angela Merkel, the person he needs the most. And it's been sort of repeatedly, sort of slight after slight, and they are minor things frequently. But when it comes to European politics and the way things here in Brussels, those minor slights add up, and he really needs that political capital to win over these countries to get it done. Look, Prime Ministers coming to Brussels demanding things. It happens all the time. We've had Matteo Renzi, the Italian Prime Minister, coming here repeatedly asking for budget flexibility. Obviously now we have Angela Merkel coming here repeatedly asking for help on refugees. It's not an unusual thing for Prime Ministers to come here and demand things, but you have to have done the hard work beforehand to sort of lay the groundwork so that when you are in real trouble, you have the political capital in other governments that you can turn to them and say, it's my turn now, can you help me out?
And this will play, what Peter's just been describing, play into the fears of the Eurosceptics who say Mr. Cameron has come back with a mini deal, and it's the same old story about the British being presented, if not surrender terms, something pretty small.
They will say that. I suspect, however, they would have said it anyway, even had he managed to extract something far more spectacular. There is a section of his own party, certainly representative of a section of the country, which is determined to vote out regardless of the degree of reform he managed to secure. So he'll worry less about that. It's the tranche of basically reasonable, biddable Eurosceptics within his parliamentary party that he's more worried about. These are people who could have been won over, may yet be won over, depending on what emerges from this summit. But those are the people who are always in play. And if he comes back from Brussels with something really quite minimal, especially on migration, which is the issue that is raised on the doorstep with Tory MPs every day, it becomes much harder to win those people over. My guess has always been that the public will treat this referendum as the existing terms of membership, more or less, versus Brexit, and their innate caution will cause them to vote to stay in. But despite my confidence in that regard, it will be much more easy for Mr. Cameron to win if he were to secure something in the coming hours.
Peter, aren't the leaders of the 27 other countries, at least some of them, really concerned about the prospect or threat, risk of a British exit from Europe? I mean, this is a major economy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely the concern. And not only for the reason that it would damage the project, losing a major member state, the risk of sort of, the proverbial pulling the thread out of the sweater and it begins to unravel. But look, almost all these countries have rising anti-Euro sentiment in their own countries. We've heard now Marine Le Pen in France say she wants her own referendum in France. We've heard, Geert Wilders, the far-right politician in the Netherlands, who's leading in the polls right now, saying he wants his own referendum. So they're nervous that if Britain left, everyone else is going to get these ideas. I'm struck by the difference of the conversation in the Brussels bubble versus the Westminster bubble. In Brussels, to be honest with you, they actually think Cameron got more than he should have. I mean, this idea that he got this emergency break that allows him to actually do his 4 years and limit benefits for migrant workers in the UK, no one thought he could get that 2 months ago, and he actually got it. And so within Brussels, people pick up the Tusk document and say, wow, Cameron did more than we expected. And it's such a disconnect, and it goes to Cameron's difficulty in how he tries to thread this needle, that in London he's viewed as having not gotten enough, and in Brussels he's seen as gotten more than he deserved. And it's been that tension all along. And how do you balance those two things that have made it very difficult for him? And it's amazing to me to see how disconnected those two conversations have been over the last few days.
So, gentlemen, your bets at present. Do you think, Janan, that Mr. Cameron will come back and win a referendum? You still believe that?
He'll come back and win a referendum. In the meantime and in the ensuing days, he will be absolutely deluged with hostile headlines in the Conservative leading press.
And several cabinet ministers maybe to leave?
Well, there's speculation that ministers as senior as Michael Gove, the Justice Secretary, conceivably Boris Johnson, not yet in the cabinet but soon to be in the cabinet, might join the out campaign. I don't think it'll do too much damage. As long as the Prime Minister's campaigning to stay in, voters find that more persuasive than anyone else.
And Peter, are you betting on a Brexit?
I think it will remain. I mean, to quote Abraham Lincoln improperly, I don't think people will long remember what happened on this battlefield here today. I mean, I think within a week or two's time, people will have forgotten completely about this deal, frankly. It's going to be about, should Britain stay in or out? And let's remember, people underestimated Cameron at the last election. People thought he was going to have to go into a coalition government, and he won. He's a very effective campaigner. And once he throws his shoulder into this, I think that dial moves 5-10 percentage points, and I think he does win. And I think most people in Brussels in particular expect him to campaign heavily in favor. They want to help him, and they think he'll win, and they think this thing will eventually go away come June.
Peter Spiegel, our man in Brussels, thank you very much. And thank you, Janan.
Thank you.